Houdin was a French magician, the son of a clockmaker who accidentally received a book of scientific amusements or early magic tricks instead of a book on clockmaking. He made several toys using clockwork mechanisms like a peacock who spread its wings or a machine that could write and draw by itself. Apparently, his first performance was so bad that he had almost got booed off the stage. He always dressed very formally in coattails and top hat, a popular theme that would become his legacy for future magicians. In his time, a magician was no longer a street performer, but instead performed in theaters. In the 1800s, as people got more money and leisure time, interest in magicians increased as people sought diversion. Magicians often used advancing technology to contribute to their illusions. Houdin invented several things ahead of his time, including an early light bulb, a self-feeder for horses, and a thermostat. Speaking of inventions, let's take a quick look at some that famously give people the creeps. Automatons are self-operating machines which are designed to appear to be operating on their own but are actually being controlled by a complex mechanism with very specific instructions. Animatronics are modern offshoot of automatons, but include electronic components often used in theme parks. Automatophobia is the fear of human-like figures, while pediophobia is the fear of dolls and stuffed toys. Dolls that talk or move and porcelain dolls are usually the ones that people are most afraid of. At the root of this phobia is the fear of the silent killer. The world is a place full of threats, and it can be quite scary to think that something typically friendly could harm us. Wind-up toys can creep people out more than scare them. If something scares you, you will generally just run away, whereas something creepy it's kind of uncertain. Are they gonna murder you, or are they not? You might stick around a little bit longer. In the absence of a real threat, we kind of wait. We are on guard, ready to respond, but not really sure how. When we are creeped out, we're hypervigilant, our attention is focused, in an attempt to process whether something is really threatening or not. Seeing a face that is human, we are immediately inclined to read it. And when we can't, we're a little bit unsettled. Creepy doll stories date back to the early 1800s. During this time, the creepiness in these stories is not actually directed at the dolls, but rather the makers who are able to do evil deeds through their malevolent creations. In the 20th century, creepy dolls became actively homicidal. Anybody remember Talking Tina doll from the Twilight Zone? The director of Annabelle films commented that the thing about dolls is that they emulate a human figure that lacks emotion. When you stare into the doll's eyes, it just stares back, empty. That empty space is just begging to be filled with evil. Many wind-up toys are operated by a series of keys or cranks, which activate small springs and turn gears when released. Sometimes these can release on their own, and that causes a movement which can cause a fright. So what happens when you combine a doll with mechanical movement? Circus-themed wind-up toys are quite common and creepy. With that long preamble about why you should be very scared right now, let's look at some of the creepiest wind-ups in our collection. First up is this guy. He is our bartender, and he dates to the 1960s. This guy isn't a bartender for you. He is just making himself drinks over and over and over again. Every time he mixes himself a drink and shoots it back, smoke shoots out of his ears. I am drawn to this toy because it's a toy of its time, and I kind of love the nostalgia of the 1950s and 60s. I mean, really, what kind of kid would have a bartender to play with today? This toy was manufactured by the Nomura Toy Company, TN, in Japan in the 1960s. TN was a leader in tin toys after the war, opening in the late 1940s and dominating the market. Later into the 1960s, plastic was starting to be used more and more in their toys. Both tin and plastic feature heavily in this battery-operated toy. In 1962, Roscoe Toys, another Japan-based toy company, released the Charlie Weaver Bartender battery-operated toy. It is clear from the design of the original Charlie Weaver battery-operated toy that this TN version is a copy or a knockoff. Apparently, this isn't the naughtiest thing that Roscoe was up to in the 1960s. They also made toys that smoked, gambled, and stripped. Charlie Weaver was a character played by the actor Cliff Arquette in the 1950s. This character first appeared on the NBC Tonight Show in 1957. He wore a swished hat, he had little round glasses, a rumpled shirt, a broad tie, baggy pants, and suspenders. He's very funny, using his fictional family and townspeople to bring people to laughter with almost perfect timing. He later went on to be one of the most visited squares on Hollywood squares. So that brings us to our next creepy phobia, clowns. First up, we have this wind-up clown. And originally, this guy would have had a stick that went into this little spring here. And at the top of that stick, there would have been a plate that would spin around and around. He's made by Toy Play Limited, aka TPS. TPS was founded by Yoshio Utagawa, Yukio Miyakawa, Yasuo Kushida in 1956. Their logo is 3 raised fingers, and that represents the 3 founders. The company most likely lasted into the early 1970s when the market became full of other toy companies. They focused on producing colorful toys for younger children. Colorophobia is the fear of clowns and is no laughing matter. Many people find them creepy, if not downright terrifying. Part of this is thanks to Stephen King. Mostly, it's the makeup. Makeup on clowns is very unsettling, like he's smiling but not smiling. Oversized lips and brows can cause distortions in the face. Clowns are mischievous, unpredictable, overly happy, which tends to put anybody on edge, am I right? The first evil clown in popular culture might have been the Joker, who was first featured in Batman comics in the early 1940s. Earlier evil clowns were found in lead roles in 2 similar stories dating back to 1874. Our next creepy clown is not only extremely tall, but also plays the violin. He is also made by TPS. So next up we have our monkey riding a cart. So this is a circus monkey. It's reportedly a Guntherman toy dating to about 1900 to 1910. He is wind up, and this monkey on the back here is pretty creepy, mostly because most of his face is scratched off, which adds to the spookiness of this toy, and his eyes in particular were scratched out, so I'm sure there's probably a story there. Also, ever since I watched The Wizard of Oz as a little girl, I've really not been a fan of monkeys, flying or not. Unless it's like King Kong, because, I mean, who didn't have a little bit of sympathy for that guy? Moving on to a more musical note, we have a creepy clown Ferris wheel. So this Ferris wheel dates to about 1940, and it's made by the J. Shen Company, which is founded in New York City in 1903 by Julius Shen. Shen himself had 1 arm and was able to use a metal stamper to produce tin prizes for Cracker Jack boxes out of his small New York City loft. In 1907, he opened a new factory in New Jersey and made the switch to tin lithography. In the new plant with new techniques, Shen produced many toys such as piggy banks, horse-drawn carriages, and Disney characters. Sadly, in 1926, he passed away in a horse riding accident in Central Park. Upon his death, the toy company passed on to his widow, who signed it over to her brother Samuel Hoffman. There was also a roller coaster as a part of the circus-themed toys that the company produced. There is a more recent model. This version of it, is a more recent model because the earlier models reportedly had sideshow freaks featured on the sides, and this one has children on it. So, moving on to our next fair-themed item, we have a carousel. But what could be creepy about that? Oh wait, you must have seen Something Wicked This Way Comes, Strangers on a Train, or the Alfred Hitchcock film, The Third Man. So this carousel is made by Gunterman, and it dates to 1900 to 1910. The Gunterman Toy Company was founded by Siegfried Gunterman in 1826 in Nuremberg, Germany. I've also heard it pronounced as Guntherman. The company produced mechanical and wind-up toys that were known for their exquisite quality and craftsmanship. They also produced many toy cars and airplanes, as soon as they became popular in later decades. Guntherman was also another long-established toy company that thrived in West Germany under American occupation. So why is this creepy? Have you ever heard about the haunted carousel? There is reportedly a haunted carousel in Jantzen Beach, Oregon. Most carousel horses are creepy anyway. They can be old, rusty, have yellow teeth, and empty glass eyes. It is really hard not to get creeped out. This is another item related to a World's Fair. The haunted carousel was designed, actually, for the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis. It was designed by C.W. Parker, and who was known at the time as the Amusement King, as he oversaw an empire of rides and amusement parks. After St. Louis, the carousel went on to Venice Beach, California in 1921. In 1928, it ended up at Jantzen Beach, and it was loved by many children until the 1950s. Beginning in the 1950s, reports were made by many children who saw other pale-faced children riding the carousel. Many children refused to ride after an experience like this. Many adults did not believe the children until other adults also witnessed the apparitions, who were reported to be wearing clothing from the 1920s. There are different styles of horses produced in the U.S. for carousels. They are the Coney Island style, which features elaborate faux jeweled saddles, the Philadelphia style, which features more realistic saddles, and the Country Fair style, which features sometimes no saddle at all. Creepy ghost children strike again. So next up, we have this tin squirrel set, which also has a little bit of a fun wheel. And it was made by Kokyu Shokai, and they were a Japanese toy manufacturing company that specialized in tin lithograph toys. They were mainly based in Tokyo. The company was also known as Kokyu Trading Co., and they most likely operated in the latter half of the 20th century, like 1950s onwards, along with many Japanese toy manufacturers. This crazy little squirrel winds up, and then he runs around and around and around this little tin toy. There's a little river depicted here and some butterflies. He's seemingly harmless, right? Until you see that one eye peeking out at you, just watching and waiting. That beady little eye. Meet Spidey. He's made by the Steiff Company, also known as Spidey Spine or Spidey Spider. His body is made from mohair, which has been airbrushed by hand in red, brown, and green. Most Steiff animals are made from alpaca, felt, mohair, or woven plush. They are stuffed with Excelsior. Spidey was produced in 1960 and 1961 only. Margaret Steiff was born in Germany in 1847. She was paralyzed at a young age due to polio. She had limited mobility in her right hand. She became a seamstress at age 17, worked in her sister's tailoring shop. When her sisters moved away, she kept working in the shop on her own. In 1874, she converted her parents' house to a tailor shop. She altered a sewing machine so that she could operate it with her left hand instead. In the fashion magazine Modern Welt, she saw a pattern for a little tiny stuffed elephant and made one for herself as a pincushion in 1879. Many of her neighbors really liked the stuffed animal and requested some for their children. The Steiff Company was officially founded in 1880. Its first big seller was the elephant. They released their first illustrated catalog in 1892. In addition to elephants, there were monkeys, donkeys, horses, camels, pigs, mice, dogs, cats, hares, and giraffes. Her motto was, "For children, only the best is good enough." Their most popular stuffed creature was a teddy bear, designed by her nephew Richard in 1902. A breakthrough came in 1906 when an American trader ordered over 3,000 bears, sold in the U.S. as Teddy Bear, named after Theodore or Teddy Roosevelt. On a side note, did you know that the teddy bear was named after Theodore Roosevelt? In 1902, he appeared in a cartoon called Drawing the Line in Mississippi, which depicted an incident when Roosevelt was invited on a hunting trip by the governor of Mississippi, and he actually refused to shoot a bear that had been tied to a tree as it was unsportsmanlike. Morris Mitchum saw this political cartoon and sought permission to reproduce Teddy's Bear. He later went on to found the Ideal Novelty and Toy Company. The Steiff Bear was produced after the Ideal Bear, but was not necessarily inspired by Roosevelt's incident, as Richard Steiff often found his inspiration for stuffed animals from those found in cages at the zoo. The two would not have likely known about each other's designs, as transatlantic communication was quite poor at the time. Steiff stuffed animals were quite popular, as they say, copying is the greatest form of flattery. They began to set themselves apart by placing a button in the ear of their teddy bears, as many people tried to copy their designs. This one has a little button right here on the arm. With that, I will end with a little joke. What's a spider's favorite pastime? Fly fishing. Now, we're going to have a little bit of Halloween fun. I'm going to read you a poem from one of my favorite Halloween friends, Edward Gorey. A is for Amy, who fell down the stairs. B is for Basil, assaulted by bears. C is for Claire, who wasted away. D is for Desmond, thrown out of a sleigh. E is for Ernest, who choked on a peach. F is for Fanny, sucked dry by a leech. G is for George, smothered under a rug. H is for Hector, done in by a thug. I is for Ida, who drowned in the lake. J is for James, who took lie by mistake. K is for Kate, who was struck with an axe. L is for Leo, who swallowed some tacks. M is for Maud, who was swept out to sea. N is for Neville, who died of ennui. O is for Olive, run through with an awl. P is for Prue, tramped flat in a brawl. Q is for Quentin, who sank in a mire. R is for Rhoda, consumed by a fire. S is for Susan, who perished of fits. T is for Titus, who blew into bits. U is for Una, who slipped down a drain. V is for Victor, squashed under a train. W is for Winnie, embedded in ice. X is for Xerxes, devoured by mice. Y is for Yorick, whose head was bashed in. Z is for Zilla, who drank too much gin. Thank you again for joining us today for our exploration of some of the more mythical and magical items in our collection. I hope you have a safe, happy, and unhaunted Halloween.